You look at a simple task, something small, something that, in theory, should take only a few minutes. But the body does not move, the mind does not begin. There is a silent resistance. It is not laziness, it is not lack of will. It is as if something inside you were too heavy to take the first step. You pick up your phone, you scroll the screen, you open an app, close it, open another, and deep down, that familiar phrase appears. I am very lazy. Why can't I do something so simple? There are people who do this without difficulty. And that comparison begins to grow, not out loud, but in silence, a subtle pressure, a light guilt, almost imperceptible. You know what you need to do. The list is there. The tasks are clear. Nothing impossible. Nothing extraordinary. And even so, there is a block, a type of tiredness that does not come from the body, a tiredness that seems to come from within, as if the mind were tired before the day even begins. Maybe you have experienced this many times, waking up, looking at the day that begins, and feeling a weight that has no name. Nothing has happened yet, but the energy already seems low. The motivation already seems distant. And then another silent conclusion appears. I need to be more disciplined. I need to try harder. I need to stop being like this. But there is a detail that almost no one notices. Difficulty acting does not always mean lack of strength. Sometimes it means excess load. Because the human mind does not get tired only from physical work. It gets tired from decisions, from stimuli, from worries, from invisible responsibilities. During the day, you think more than you imagine. You choose what to respond. You decide what to prioritize. You evaluate risks. You solve small problems. You manage emotions. You control impulses. You interpret signals, anticipate, adjust, avoid mistakes, respond quickly. All of this consumes energy, even when it seems simple, even when it seems automatic. And the curious thing is that this type of effort is rarely recognized. No one sees, no one measures, no one counts it. But the nervous system feels it. It records it. It accumulates it, like a glass receiving small drops throughout the day. A message, a decision, a worry, an expectation, another decision, another stimulus, another responsibility. And little by little, that glass fills up. Without noise, without drama, without warning. Until a moment arrives when any new task seems too heavy. Not because it is difficult, but because the system is already full. This is a type of exhaustion that does not appear in the muscles. It does not appear in tests. It does not appear in conversations, but it appears in the difficulty of starting, in the feeling of blockage, in the urge to postpone, in the need to step away, in the silent attempt to conserve energy. And this is the point where many people make a common mistake. They interpret mental fatigue as laziness, but what seems like lack of discipline is often excess stimulation. What seems like disinterest is often saturation. What seems like lack of motivation is often a nervous system trying to survive excess. Because when the brain is overloaded, it does not ask for effort, it asks for pause. But instead of listening to that signal, most people do the opposite. They push, they demand, they criticize themselves, they compare themselves, and they try to force productivity in a system that is already exhausted. And the more they force, the heavier everything becomes. The more they demand, the harder it becomes to start. Not because you do not want to, but because, internally, something is already at the limit. There is a curious moment when the mind begins to seem slow, distracted, disorganized. You read something and need to read it again. You forget small things. You take longer to decide. You find it difficult to concentrate. And once again, that automatic interpretation appears. I am becoming lazy. But perhaps the correct word is not laziness. Perhaps it is overload. Because the human brain was not designed to deal with constant stimuli without real rest. It needs space. It needs silence. It needs true pauses. But the modern world rarely offers that. The phone vibrates, the mind responds, a message arrives, another task appears, a worry arises, another decision needs to be made. And even when the body stops, the mind keeps working, thinking, reviewing, planning, worrying, simulating. It is silent work, continuous, invisible. And over time, that work begins to weigh, not in a dramatic way, but in a cumulative way, a tiredness that grows slowly, a wear that settles little by little, until one day you look at a simple task and feel that you cannot start, not because you are incapable, but because something inside you has already worked too much. There is a silent difference between laziness and exhaustion. Laziness is lack of willingness. Exhaustion is lack of energy. Laziness avoids effort. Exhaustion cannot sustain it. And often, what seems like laziness is just a tired system trying to protect itself. Because the human brain has a very old defense mechanism. When energy decreases, it reduces movement. It slows down. It postpones. It avoids tasks. Not due to lack of character, but due to the need for survival. It is like a phone with low battery. It begins to save energy. It lowers the brightness, closes apps, reduces performance. Not because it is broken, but because it needs to preserve what remains. The human body does something similar. When the mind is overloaded, it enters economy mode. It avoids decisions. It postpones tasks. It seeks distraction. It looks for rest. But instead of interpreting this as a sign of tiredness, many people interpret it as personal failure. And then a silent cycle begins. You feel tired. You blame yourself for being tired. You try to force yourself to produce. You become even more tired. You blame yourself again, and the weight increases. Not only in the body, but in the mind. Because self-criticism also consumes energy. Comparison consumes energy. Internal pressure consumes energy. And little by little, the system becomes saturated, not due to lack of strength, but due to excess load. Perhaps the question was never, why am I so lazy? Perhaps the question is another. How much invisible weight have you been carrying every day without realizing it? Because the mind does not become exhausted only from work. It becomes exhausted from constant stimulation, from repeated decisions, from silent pressure, from continuous responsibility. And when that accumulation crosses a certain limit, something changes. Movement decreases. Energy disappears. Motivation dissolves. And what remains is a feeling that is difficult to explain. A tiredness that does not go away with a night of sleep. A slowness that does not improve with willpower. A resistance that does not disappear with discipline. Perhaps this is not laziness. Perhaps it is an overloaded system. A system that has functioned for too long without real rest. A system that tried to keep up with everything, respond to everything, solve everything, handle everything, until, silently, it reached the limit. And when the limit arrives, the body does not scream. It slows down. It blocks. It protects. And from the outside, this may look like disinterest. It may look like lack of effort. It may look like laziness. But inside, it is only exhaustion. An invisible exhaustion. A silent exhaustion. An exhaustion that no one sees. Not even you. There is something deeply human in this experience. The desire to do. The intention to act. The wish to be productive. But the feeling of not being able to. Not due to lack of character. Not due to lack of responsibility. But due to lack of mental energy. Because mental energy also runs out. Just as the body gets tired after physical effort, the mind gets tired after cognitive effort. And the problem is that this effort rarely has pause. Even when you rest physically, the mind remains active, thinking about what needs to be done, reviewing what has already happened, anticipating what might go wrong. And that internal work continues, silent, constant, uninterrupted, until a moment arrives when the system begins to ask for something simple. No more discipline, no more effort, no more pressure, but space. a space that many times was never offered. Because from early on, many people learned to keep going, to continue, to produce, to respond, to solve, without stopping, without questioning, without truly resting. And over time, that continuity turns into overload. Not a dramatic overload, but a cumulative overload. A sum of small pressures, small decisions, small tensions, that together become heavy, heavy enough to slow down the mind, heavy enough to block movement, heavy enough to make simple tasks seem difficult. Perhaps that is why, on some days, you feel something strange. Not exactly sadness, not exactly anxiety, but a kind of silent exhaustion, a feeling of being full of thoughts, full of stimuli, full of responsibilities, full of everything. And when everything is full, any new task seems too much, not because it is big, but because there is no more space. This completely changes the way we understand laziness, because perhaps the problem was never lack of motivation. Perhaps it was excess load. Perhaps you are not avoiding effort. Perhaps you are trying to survive excess. Perhaps the blockage is not weakness. Perhaps it is protection. And if that is true, then the question changes. It is no longer, why can't I do it? Perhaps it is, how much has your mind been carrying in silence for too long?